Most people use an FHA loan to buy their first single family home. I used it to buy a property to create cash flow. I fixed up the place, I rented out one unit, and then eventually I rented out both units. And once that happened, within 6 to 12 months, I was really earning an extra paycheck that to some people might seem like not a lot of money, but it really changed my perspective and my life. Today, I'm going to walk you through how the FHA loan actually works, how you can do it, and how you can use it to start creating passive income, even if you're just starting out. And I made some slides, so let's go over to those. All right, so we're back. The gist of the FHA loan is that essentially with any price of the property, you can pay up to or as low as 3.5% down. We consider that leverage, and the idea that you're using as little as money as possible to create a large income or a larger income. That's kind of the overall arching idea of taking, this FHA loan and utilizing it. Essentially, it's a tool. So that's how I bought my first duplex. And for the rest of your life, it just creates cash flow. It just creates income. If you choose the property correctly, this is like a money-making machine. It's just a cash cow. It could be literally something that stays with you and could launch you into more properties, more in other investments, you name it. So let's move on. So there's a couple things you have to know that, if your credit score is super low, you're probably going to be, working with a different type of FHA loan. But for the most part, if you're watching this, your credit score is most likely in the 600s. I'm just guessing. 640 is good, 680 is better, so on and so forth. So if it's 700, you're golden. But regardless, if it's 580 or above, you can take advantage of this 3.5% down. You do need some employment history. I didn't necessarily need 2 years of employment from the same employer, but you need to prove to the mortgage brokers that you've been working, you've had a solid income for a couple of years, and that's it. So moving on, just as an example, let's say in general, right? I'm choosing a 500K for a 2 to 4 unit building because in the United States, based on what I can see now, 2025, the average cost of a property is around 400K. So just for easy numbers, I chose 500K. It's close to the property price that I bought anyways. So, but regardless, just check this out. For a $500,000 building, you're able to, put down $17,500. That's minimum. If you want to put down more, that's great. It doesn't matter. Might as well just put down 3.5% and call it a day. In the United States, closing costs, have changed a little bit. So the last 4 years, the market has been pretty interesting. And although normally, historically speaking, the buyer pays the closing costs, right? Because if you want it, you got to pay the closing costs. But in the last 5 years, it's kind of flipped a little bit because the market's been so unusual and competitive that the seller will pay the closing costs. And for anything else, the first month or so, you might need to do some painting. You might need to do some, small updates. Maybe there's some things that are broken. You might have to pay more. You might have to pay nothing. I don't know. But just to have about 3 to 5K and maybe like a Home Depot credit card, those are like some real good, things to have in your back pocket, just in case, you want to change like the door locks, or you want to just add some security cameras, something like that. Maybe there's a cracked window, or like you want to change a faucet. it's short one. So the total amount needed is 25 to 30K. That's my recommendation. But and for those of you who are just starting out, that's a lot of money. You can be working up to this, squirreling away money year after year. That's great. Or, especially if your your credit score is really good, you might qualify for using other people's money. And that's something that, a lot of people don't know about. So, using more credit or bridge loan or any other kind of personal loan, that's another way to just get into the market and start it up, because your property could increase in price pretty fast and you could be earning cash flow really fast. And within 6 to 24 months, this is a wash. All right, going on. Some of the things that the FHA loan, comes with is the appraisal process and the home inspection. These properties that you buy, you really have to have like no massive repairs. You don't want to have like a house that's falling apart. If it's an as is, when you are purchasing or when you're shopping for a property and it says as is, those are usually like, cash. You want to buy the house cash. Some other things that the home inspector and bank want to know is if the heating system works, the water works, everything's okay. Essentially that there's no asbestos, in the paint or something like that. Like the house is in real shabby. More likely than not, the lead paint or any kind of lead, like surrounding any pipes, that's probably long gone. Knob and tube wiring, that's more likely than not long gone. Some of the things that they check for is seeing if it's in the walls or the pipes, like the faucets, everything's like, usually like with a good home inspector, they'll tell you right then and there, like what, to look for. So that's a big learning lesson. I mean, I kind of already knew that stuff, but when you do it all at once in one big home inspection, it's good to walk with them. So anyways, moving on. So the simple process is, oh, my face is like covering the emoji. All right, cool. So essentially you need first a pre-approval. That's through a mortgage lender or bank. And then you go shopping for a property. And that could take a while. For me, it took a number of months, like 2 to 3 months. And it's a lot of properties, you're kissing a lot of frogs. And then eventually, you make an offer. I've made multiple offers and a lot of offers were, rejected, and you do the best you can and you stick to your guns too, because for me, like I was approved for $500,000, but I ended up settling for something, a little bit less than that. So, which was good because it kept the mortgage, the monthly mortgage cost down, and um, it kind of left some room in the bank for me so I can make repairs. So it's something to food for thought for you. And the next step is after you're accepted, your offer is accepted. There's an appraisal and an inspection. Um, they're usually the same thing, just having a home inspector approve of everything. It is possible that in your offer that you have some contingencies where if the property doesn't meet, like if it's $6,000 worth of costs to update things, that you can, say no to the property. A lot of people in the last 5 years, they don't even care. Some people will buy the house without an inspection. That's how crazy. But I do not recommend that. You definitely want a home inspection because, in my case, there weren't any fixes that were needed. Like all the fixes that I did were aesthetic things to make it look better. And eventually I did, as time went on, I did much bigger projects on the property to make it my own. But you don't want to buy. Unless you have a ton of money. I mean, when you're starting out, you don't want to buy a house and then find out later that you need $50 to $100,000 worth of repair work done to the house. Like, that's just crazy. So anyways, after your property is inspected, if all goes well, you close. And moving on, anything that I missed? Well, some of the good things, I wanted to keep outlining. This is like an FHA loan, walk through, and essentially, it's when you do this process more than once, you start understanding that you could just probably walk through an open house, right? Like with yourself, just by yourself or with your realtor, and you can identify issues much quicker with the heating, the electrical, with the roof, windows, bathrooms, the kitchen, whatever, like anything, the floors, the wall, everything. You just start seeing what it is and understanding like the cost, what it costs to fix things, so you could make like a mental note or have like a checklist and just say, okay, this is fine, this is fine, this is fine. And at the end of the day, you might say, okay, it just needs like a new fridge, and that could be like, $500 or $1,000, whatever, maybe it's $2,000. I don't know, but essentially you could have that mental picture. Like when you go to buy the house, all you need to do is do this, like buy a stove. So walking the property like a home inspector is a skill, but it's easily acquired. All right. So the real power of an FHA loan, essentially, it's starting out with your first property, especially, and I highly recommend that when you buy your first property, that it's a 2, 3, or 4 unit property. Okay, so let that sink in, because essentially you could live in 1 unit for free. Now, this is called house hacking, but in layman's terms, you're essentially just having someone else live in the other unit and pay all or most of the mortgage. And that's what I did, and eventually after 6 or 12 months, you can move out, you can keep leapfrogging into like the next property. So using that first property as a starter home / investment, that's really powerful. And, all it takes, I'm up in the Northeast of the United States, but for the most part, the rest of the United States, it could be much more than $15,000, but in most cases, you may not even need that much, like at all. Like under $10,000 is really short money. And to start utilizing that money, and especially if it's not even your own money, you could start investing in this property right away without even any of your own money. So and it's something that can change your life. So something to consider. Anyways, that's all from this presentation. I've done it a few more times, and I think I'm done. So on to back to the camera. So here's the truth. Buying that first property, in the beginning, it was a home for a little bit when I fixed it up. And I want to walk you through that too. But it also gave me some income, and it also gave me a new vision for what the future could be, because this is really just an experiment, right? I didn't really understand if it actually could build income. And if you're watching this, I hope you can take something away from that too, because taking $15,000 and creating essentially around $50,000 added income per year, year after year. I mean, if you think about it, I can continue raising the rents and the mortgage is fixed, right? So the mortgage is fixed and the income keeps going up. What do you think is going to happen in 5, 10, or 15 years? So my plan is not to necessarily pay down the mortgage, which most people do for 30 years, and I just know that there's so many other, avenues to take with this. So if you're interested in learning more about this stuff, subscribe, leave some comments, ask some questions, because I'm probably not going over everything, but I'm trying to walk through this step by step. And if this resonated with you, reach out to me. Who knows? So I'd be happy to answer any questions you have as you're starting out. And I think that's, I
This is where it starts. So make sure you rewatch and ask some questions. Thank you.